Welcome to Network Africa. We're glad you could join us. Coming up on the program, Nigeria prepares to play host to the U.S. Secretary of State, John Kerry. We'll fill you in on the agenda. Then the United Nations investigates peacekeepers' response to a hotel attack in South Sudan. And later on our Nigerians in Diaspora segment, we look at how one of our own is promoting culture through comedy. Thanks again for making out the time to join us on Network Africa. I'm Cynthia Are. By this time next Tuesday, the U.S. Secretary of State, Mr. John Kerry, will be in Nigeria after spending a day in Kenya. As regards the Kenya visit, we understand that Mr. Kerry will be meeting with President Uhuru Kenyatta to discuss regional security issues and counterterrorism cooperation, as well as bilateral issues. Mr. Kerry will also meet with the Kenyan Foreign Minister Amina Mohamed and other regional foreign ministers to discuss key challenges in East Africa. When he comes to Nigeria, here's what's on the agenda. We understand that Mr. Kerry will hold meetings with President Muhammadu Buhari and northern governors, and we also understand that he will travel to Sokoto and Abuja on those days, that's 23rd and 24th, and we'll also meet with President Muhammadu Buhari to discuss counterterrorism efforts, the Nigerian economy, and the fight against corruption and human rights issues. In Sokoto, he will deliver a speech on the importance of resilient communities and religious tolerance in countering violent extremism. In Abuja, the Secretary will meet with a group of adolescent girls working to change community perceptions that devalue the role of girls in the society. Joining us on the program is the Voice of America's Chris Stein, and he is in Lagos. He joins us on Network Africa. Chris, thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's going to be a pretty busy week for Secretary Kerry. Why is he making these visits at this time, especially in Nigeria?
Well, it's getting to the end of the Obama administration, and this will probably be the last major cabinet official to come and visit Nigeria before the Obama administration leaves office next year. And it's probably, sort of a way to continue the relationship with the Buhari administration. It's been about just over a year since Secretary Kerry was last in Nigeria, which was for his inauguration, I believe. We'll likely see conversations between Secretary Kerry and President Buhari sort of aimed at strengthening the relationship and also talking about issues that the U.S. and Nigeria are an interest in, and perhaps some new policy announcements geared at one of the main areas that the U.S. and Nigeria collaborate on, which is security, the economy, or the fight against corruption.
Now, based on the agenda, part of which you just highlighted there for us, we see a lot of crucial discussions which the Secretary will be having with President Buhari. Are we clear just yet about how the U.S. plans to assist Nigeria, especially as regards the economy?
Well, I don't necessarily know if there's anything the U.S. specifically can do to kind of help Nigeria weather the recession that it's about to go into. A lot of the reasons for that have to do with things that are sort of unique to Nigeria. I think there will probably be, kind of ongoing conversations on issues that they have worked on before and in the past that probably more have to do with corruption and security. As far as the economy, and I mean, obviously American investment in Nigeria is something that, the U.S. wants to promote, but whether or not it'd be something that is extensive enough to change the economic situation in a dramatic way, it's probably too soon to say.
What about we understand he'll be, Secretary Kerry will also be in Sokoto, where he plans to deliver a speech on the importance of resilient communities and religious tolerance in countering violent extremism. Any more information as regards the war on terror, specifically Boko Haram, and how the United States might be helping Nigeria on that?
The cooperation thus far has involved training Nigerian troops. There's a small number of U.S. troops in Maiduguri now. And then there are also American drones operating from Cameroon that are flying surveillance missions over areas where Boko Haram are active in other countries and northeast Nigeria as well. There has been talk of potentially selling a type of ground attack airplane to Nigeria. I don't know if there'll be any news on that coming from this visit. It's possible that there will be some kind of new security or quote-unquote war on terror-related news announced by the secretary during the visit. I do think that one of the main reasons to do the visit in Sokoto is to kind of extend the presence of the U.S. U.S. diplomats outside of just the usual circles in Lagos and Abuja, which are the two cities that John Kerry has visited previously.
Well, Chris, since this is a give and take situation, bilateral relations, what does the United States hope to gain from this visit?
I think the U.S., it might not necessarily be anything, any particular one large objective now. I think there will be talks. It's probably good for the two countries to have face-to-face meetings with some of its highest level officials. And there's also just the fact that Nigeria is one of Africa's largest economies. It's going to be one of the world's most populous nations in several decades, and the U.S. is playing a long game here and wants to make sure that this administration and subsequent administrations are aware that it's watching and it wants to be involved and kind of be a partner. I don't know if there's any specific goal that they're going to work toward with this visit. It's definitely kind of about keeping up appearances. As well as kind of pushing forward, initiatives that were started earlier in previous years.
Well, final question here, Chris. How effective do you think Secretary Kerry will be when it comes to, especially his trip in northern Nigeria, to talk about religious tolerance, for instance, as a strategy in countering terrorism?
Well, it's hard to say. He's certainly going to try, and he's going to go somewhere where there hasn't been an American diplomatic visit, I believe, in a while. Certainly not from, the last big U.S. officials have usually gone to Yola, or as I mentioned earlier, Lagos and Abuja. I don't think there's been a visit to Sokoto in a long time. So, he sees it as a place where there is a different segment of Nigerian society that he wants to address. And he's going to kind of give his message, and whether or not it's effective will sort of only be known in coming weeks and months or even years as questions of religious tolerance, make themselves known in Nigeria and in the north and the south going forward.
Yes. Thank you very much. The Voice of America's Chris Stein. Thank you for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you.
Now, the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, launched an investigation into accusations that peacekeepers in South Sudan failed to respond properly to an attack on a Juba hotel by uniformed men who killed a journalist and raped several civilians. Mr. Ban was said to be alarmed by the initial findings of a UN facts-finding mission into the attack on the hotel terrain that happened on July the 11th during an outbreak of fighting between troops loyal to President Salva Kiir and those backing former Vice President Riek Machar. Here's what the deputy spokesman for Mr. Ban Ki-moon had to say about the matter.
Secretary General is alarmed by the preliminary findings of a fact-finding investigation by the United Nations mission in South Sudan into the attack on Hotel Terrain in Juba on 11th of July, in which one person was killed and several civilians were raped and brutally beaten by men in uniform. The Secretary General is also concerned about allegations that UNMISS did not respond appropriately to prevent this and other grave cases of sexual violence committed in Juba. Due to the gravity of these incidents, related allegations, and the preliminary findings by UNMISS, the Secretary General has decided to launch an independent special investigation to determine the circumstances surrounding these incidents and to evaluate the mission's overall response. The Secretary General reiterates his outrage over the acts of violence committed by the SPLA and opposition forces in Juba from the 8th to the 11th of July, during which many South Sudanese civilians and 2 UN peacekeepers were killed. The Secretary General urges once more the government of South Sudan to investigate these human rights violations and to prosecute those involved in these unspeakable acts of violence.
At least 800,000 internally displaced persons are facing acute shortage of food, shelter, and Medicare in the recently liberated areas of the Northeast. That's according to the Director General of the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, Mr. Sani Sidi, who has raised concerns over the situation which he described as overwhelming. He was speaking in Abuja after a road walk to mark the 2016 World Humanitarian Day. He also explained that most of those in urgent need of humanitarian assistance are children and pregnant women. On the 8th day of August every year, the day is set aside by the United Nations to raise awareness about those who need humanitarian assistance and celebrate aid workers who risk their lives trying to help.
We are dealing with 2.1 million internally displaced persons in Nigeria, about the 5th or the 6th largest in the world. Therefore, the needs are there. Of course, just very recently, because of the successes again that has been recorded by the military, most areas have been liberated. There are challenges in those areas where we are looking at over 750,000 to 800,000 around those liberated communities. Therefore, new emerging challenges are always coming up. Of course, the needs are enormous and it's very challenging, and I must say it's very overwhelming, to say the least. There are people who require special attention. There are children, there are pregnant women, there are people with various challenges who require, special attention. Therefore, those micro plans that has been developed will address those critical issues, will ensure that all those who require special needs, have been attended to.
And staying in Nigeria, in order to manage migration issues for the benefit of Nigerians and other neighboring countries, it's important to move away from isolated unisectoral focus to a more comprehensive approach. Those are the words of the Kano State Governor Abdullahi Ganduje at the opening ceremony of the 2016 Migration Retreat holding in Kano. He says that effective and efficient border management requires dedication and perseverance if the nation is to achieve desired results.